Hi, and welcome to Blackbeard Part 1. Hi, and welcome to Blackbeard Part 2, The Fate of Blackbeard. I hope you enjoyed Part 1 and are ready for Part 2. This time, we are gonna talk about the inspiration for Blackbeard and his role in the future of One Piece. But before we can talk about Blackbeard himself, I have to lay out a few things first. As you might already know, one of Oda's inspirations for One Piece is Viking the Viking. Because of that, the world of One Piece is heavily inspired by Norse mythology. I am sure that most of you already heard about the Cerberus theory when it comes to Blackbeard. Cerberus is a three-headed hellhound that guards the doors to the underworld. Because of its three heads, it's believed to resemble Blackbeard. But I don't think that Cerberus is the right creature we are looking for. As I said before, One Piece is inspired by Norse mythology. Cerberus, on the other hand, is a creature of Greek mythology. But there is a creature in Norse mythology that fits Blackbeard to a T. The creature I am talking about is Fenrir. Well, actually not just Fenrir. But let's take a step back. Norse mythology is not common knowledge, so let me start by giving you a crash course on the subject. At least a few things we need to know before getting into this. There are many gods in Norse mythology split into two tribes, but we only need to know about one of these tribes for now. They are called the Aesir gods and goddesses, and include the likes of Odin, Thor and Tyr. Then we have the opposition, the giants, also called Titans, or the actual term, Devourers. And then there is the wolf Fenrir. The inspiration for Blackbeard's very being in the world of One Piece. But as I said before, not just Fenrir. It is the collective of three wolves: Skoll, Hati and Fenrir himself. I should also note that Skoll and Hati are believed to be different names of Fenrir. Now that we had our crash course, let's begin with the actual connections to Blackbeard and what they mean for the story of One Piece. I think that all three wolves represent the side of Blackbeard. In this case, the first wolf, Skoll, is represented by Blackbeard's right side, and here is why. Skoll's epithet is mockery, or the one who mocks, something we see Blackbeard doing quite a few times, most prominent before his fight against Ace. Skoll is also said to be the one who swallows the sun. And what is commonly known to be able to swallow, or better, devour a sun? How fitting that the reveal of Blackbeard's Yami Yami no Mi, Darkness Darkness fruit, is in his fight against Ace, a fire human.
Ace, お前の体は火だろ。俺は闇だ。闇とは引力。すべてを引きずり込む力。一切の光も逃さねえ無限の引力だ。
While Blackbeard is basically a walking black hole, Ace can be seen as the personification of the sun, especially with his last attack, Flame Emperor. To make things even clearer, Oda actually used to have the swastika tattooed on Ace's back, but they decided to change it because the Westerners only knew the swastika as the so-called Hakenkreuz, a symbol that the Third Reich used. In actuality though, the swastika symbolizes Surya, god of the sun, day and light, basically the solar deity in Hinduism. While I'm at it, I should mention that so we can say that the whole fight between Blackbeard and Ace is basically showing the process of the sun being devoured, or at least teases us on what is about to come, but more about that later. Let's get to the second wolf, Hati. He is represented by Blackbeard's left side. He, on the other hand, is said to be the one who swallows the moon, and his epithet is hatred, or the one who hates. In the case of Skoll, we saw Blackbeard mocking the sun he is about to devour. But have we ever seen Blackbeard hate someone? The only time I can think of in which Blackbeard showed some genuine hate is in this drawing of Blackbeard as a child. So, similar to having the Yami no Mi to swallow the sun, he needed another specific devil fruit to devour the moon. That might explain why he didn't go for Ace's fruit when he had the chance to, but instead was going for the power to destroy the world, the Gura no Mi. If it comes to destroying the moon or bringing down the red line, the Gura no Mi surely comes in handy. But what if it comes down to being represented by an actual person? The clues we need to answer that question can be found in this quote from the poetic Edda Grimm. Skald is the name of the wolf who follows the shining priest into the desolate forest, and the other is Hati, who chases the bright bride of the sky. Looking at the names of Ace's attacks, like God's Fire and Holy Cross, it is clear what makes him the shining priest. And I think the bright bride of the sky is none other than Imu himself. I can't get into why I think that she is the one, because that would just take way too long and would go off topic. Just know that I have a few other theories coming, and one is about the real identity and past of Imu. Let's get to the final wolf, Fenrir. His epithet is, he who dwells in the marshes. I don't think that I have to explain why this epithet fits specific characteristics of Blackbeard. Just as Skoll and Hati each represented a side of Blackbeard, Fenrir represents the mind, or better, the very being of Teach. One could say that after getting Skoll and Hati, he was completed and became Fenrir. Because it is Fenrir who, in addition of killing Odin, destroys most of the world as he devours the sun and moon, but it doesn't cancel out the possibility of a third specific Zoan-type devil fruit. So in part 1, we talked about the possible past of Blackbeard, which brings me to Fenrir's past. Fenrir was originally raised by the Aesir gods. Fearing his potential strength and his destiny to destroy the world, they tricked him and chained him up. The details on the so-called binding of Fenrir are a topic for another time. After being chained up for who knows how long, he breaks free during Ragnarök and devours all. Which leads to the age-old question, is evil born or made? But let's get back on track. Now after all of that, I should mention that I don't think that Ace actually represents the sun. It was just somewhat of a tease from Oda. Because just as Blackbeard devouring the sun, Ace, triggered Marineford, devouring the moon will trigger Ragnarök. And we also just got introduced to Nika, the actual sun god in the world of One Piece. But if not Ace, who represents the real sun? In other words, who is a reincarnation, or better, who carries the will of Nika? I think that in this case, the most obvious answer is the white one, which would be Luffy. And here's why. As I said earlier, Skoll devours the sun, but not only that, the wolves are actually said to be chasing after the moon and sun, until Ragnarök. If we look back, Blackbeard never chased Ace. What's important is that Blackbeard was in fact chasing Luffy after seeing his bounty in Mocktown, and was only stopped because of Ace on Bonnaroo Island. You could say that Ace took Luffy's place as a substitute son. Blackbeard also doesn't fall short of mocking Luffy as well. Then there's Oda's favorite panel of the Skype arc, next to the introduction of Nika, followed by what is said about Nika. Slaves prayed to him, a legendary hero who would one day free them. He'd bring smiles to their faces and deliver them from suffering. I don't think that I have to count every time Luffy and the Straw Hats did basically all of that, almost in every arc one way or another. Let's not forget about all the times Luffy has been compared to Joy Boy, directly or indirectly. Most recently by Kaido during Wano. And I think it's pretty safe to assume that Joy Boy is another name for Nika. Now that we have established why Blackbeard is Fenrir, let's see if we can find something else that can help us understand more about him. Fenrir was raised by the Aesir gods to keep him under control. But he grew too strong and they chained him up instead. Let's say that the world government represents the Aesir gods. If we think back on what I said in part 1, it could be that he didn't escape directly like Robin. Maybe they captured him first and tried to use him as a guinea pig, all while they are still on the island. But in order for that to work, he must have killed them and escaped before any word could leak out, because the world government didn't seem to know anything about him before his uprising. Fenrir was chained to a boulder and a sword was placed in Fenrir's jaws to hold them open. Maybe the sword holding his jaws open is a reference to the secret sword units under the Fleet Admiral Akainu. That would mean that the sword unit would play a big role in stopping or at least holding off Blackbeard from devouring the moon Emu for a while. As I said before, the world government is inspired by the tribe of the Azir gods, and their opposition are the Titans. I think this one is fairly obvious. The commanders of the Blackbeard pirates are titled 10 Titanic Captains, and as mentioned before, their real names are Devourers, just as in the Blackbeard pirates hunting and devouring devil fruit powers. So here we have it, Blackbeard's role in One Piece. He's gonna chase and at least try to devour the sun, the moon and trigger Ragnarok. He's the final villain that has to be defeated. He will manage to devour Emu-sama, and Luffy and Kobe, the sword, have to fight together like Roger and Garp did against Xebec on God Valley. Because I believe that Xebec was on God Valley for Emu, and he wanted to devour him in order to become the king of the world. What better way is there than dethroning the current king? Knowing that would trigger something like Ragnarok, Garp and Roger had no other choice but to fight together to stop that from happening. So this concludes part 2. I had to keep this one fairly short because there are a lot of topics that deserve their own video, but I hope you still enjoyed it.